The departure board was still showing boarding when my phone screen went dark. Not a low battery warning, not a dimming screen, just black, gone, dead in my hand like it had decided in that particular moment that it had given enough. I stared at it for 2 full seconds. The rental car smelled like pine air freshener and desperation. The shoulder of the highway was gravel and exhaust fumes, and the particular silence that descends when an engine stops and you realize something has gone catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. I was 30 minutes from the airport. My suitcase was in the back seat. And the boarding gate for Flight 2247 to Seattle was going to close in exactly 41 minutes. Let me tell you something about that flight. It wasn't just a flight. People talk about life-changing moments like they happen suddenly, like lightning, one crack, and the whole sky shifts. But most life-changing moments are built over years of smaller decisions, smaller sacrifices, smaller versions of yourself that you leave behind like shed skin. That flight to Seattle represented 12 years of shed skin. 12 years of early mornings and missed weekends and choosing ambition over comfort. 12 years of telling myself that the payoff was coming. That one day, the grind would crystallize into something real, something permanent, something that couldn't be taken from me. The position I was flying out to interview for a senior executive track role at one of the most respected consulting firms on the West Coast was the kind of opportunity that most people in my field spend entire careers chasing without ever catching. I had chased it for 12 years. I had earned the final interview through a combination of work that bordered on obsessive and a reputation I had built, stone by stone, without anyone handing me a single one. Now I was sitting on the shoulder of a highway in a rental car that had decided to give up the ghost, watching the minutes tick away on a dashboard clock that was the only electronic thing still functioning, and I was about to lose all of it. I did what any rational person in a crisis does. I assessed my options. Option 1, wait for roadside assistance. Out of the question. That alone would take longer than I had. Option 2, flag down another vehicle and beg for a ride to the airport. Possible, but uncertain. Dangerous in ways I didn't want to think about. Option 3, call someone who could get to me quickly with a working vehicle. I pulled up my contacts on my dead phone, which, of course, I couldn't because it was dead, and ran through the names in my memory. My closest friends were either out of town or too far away. My coworkers were colleagues, not the kind of people you call when you're stranded on a highway shoulder with your career on the line. Which left family? My parents lived 14 minutes from where I was sitting. 14 minutes. I knew this because I had timed the drive before, during the years when I used to visit regularly, before visiting regularly began to feel like walking into a room where the air had been subtly replaced with something heavier. My sister lived nearby. She had a car. She was almost certainly awake. I borrowed the phone of a passing motorist who stopped after seeing my hazard lights, a kind stranger whose name I never caught, and I called my mother's number from memory. She picked up on the second ring. "I'm stranded," I said. "Highway 9 just past the Merritt overpass. My rental died. I have a flight in 41 minutes. I need someone to come get me right now." There was a pause on the other end. Not a short pause. A pause long enough to make me aware of the sound of trucks passing on the highway beside me. "Right now," my mother said. "Yes, right now, please." Another pause. I heard movement in the background, the sound of a television, the particular acoustic texture of their living room, which I knew as well as I knew my own face. "Hold on," she said. She didn't put the phone down. I could hear the murmur of conversation. My mother's voice, low and explanatory, my father's voice responding, a third voice, my sister's, unmistakable, saying something I couldn't make out. Then my mother came back. "Your father says Vanessa needs the car," she said. I waited for the rest of the sentence. For the pivot. For the "but we're figuring something out," or "I'm going to call an Uber for you right now," or any version of what parents are supposed to say when their child is stranded on a highway with 40 minutes before the most important interview of their life. The rest of the sentence didn't come. "I'm sorry," I said. "She has a spa appointment." My mother's voice carried the particular careful neutrality of someone reading from a script they hadn't written but had agreed to deliver. "She's been looking forward to it." I stood on the gravel shoulder of that highway, and I tried to understand what I was hearing. Not the words, I understood the words. I was trying to understand the architecture behind them. The scaffolding of priorities that could produce this particular response in this particular moment. My sister had a spa appointment. I had a career on the line. And my family had made a choice. What about Dad's truck? I said. I kept my voice even. I was proud of that later. I only need it for 3 hours. I'll pay for gas. I'll pay for detailing, whatever it takes. The phone crackled. Then I heard my father's voice, not through my mother as an intermediary, but directly, close to the receiver, like he had leaned over to make sure I could hear him clearly. Vanessa needs it, he said. That's the end of it. I stood there on the side of that highway, and I processed the information. The morning sun was doing something almost beautiful with the exhaust haze on the asphalt. A hawk was circling in the distance. I noticed these things the way you notice small, irrelevant details when your mind is trying to protect you from a larger truth. Dad, I said, I'm going to miss the interview. I heard you, he said. This is the biggest opportunity I've had in 12 years of working. I heard you the first time. Something in his voice told me that the conversation was over. Not because the problem had been solved, because he had decided it was over. There's a particular tone that some people use when they've made a decision and they're simply waiting for you to accept it, a tone that communicates not cruelty exactly, but something colder than cruelty, a kind of absolute indifference dressed up as authority. I had heard that tone my whole life. I had spent most of my life learning to navigate around it. Can I at least speak to Vanessa? I said. There was a rustling sound, then my sister's voice flat and unbothered. What? Not a question, a statement. The word landed like a door closing. I need the car, I said. Just for 3 hours, I'm on the side of the highway. I have a flight. Mom already told me, she said. I have plans. A spa appointment, I said. Yeah. Vanessa, I paused. I tried to locate the words that would make her understand, that would cut through whatever force field of self-absorption surrounded her and land somewhere real. This interview could change my life. There was a brief silence. Then the sound I will never forget for as long as I live, the soft tap of a thumb against a touchscreen. My sister, scrolling through her phone while I stood on the side of a highway, mid-sentence, asking for help. You'll figure it out, she said. You always do. And she handed the phone back to my mother, who offered nothing more than I'm sorry, sweetheart, in a voice that sounded sorry about the inconvenience of the situation, but not about the choice that had created it. I gave the borrowed phone back to the stranger who had stopped. I thanked him. He drove away. I stood there for a moment longer, just standing, just being a person on the side of a road who had just learned something important about the people she had spent her life protecting. Then I called a cab. The cab got me to the airport in 26 minutes. I ran. I ran through the terminal in heels I should have changed out of, dodging rolling suitcases and confused tourists and a small child who had dropped a stuffed rabbit directly in the middle of the corridor. I ran all the way to gate 34B, and I arrived with 4 minutes to spare. The gate was closed. The jetway door was sealed. An agent stood behind the counter, looking at me with the particular expression of airline employees who have watched people arrive too late too many times to feel much about it anymore. I'm on that flight, I said. Adelaide Hale, I'm on that flight. She typed, she looked at her screen, she looked at me. I'm sorry, she said. The gate is closed. We can rebook you on the next available. When is the next flight to Seattle? She typed again. Tomorrow morning, she said, 7:15. I stood at that counter for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then I thanked her, walked to a row of seats near the window, and sat down. On the tarmac below, I watched the plane I should have been on push back from the gate. I watched it taxi toward the runway with the slow, deliberate inevitability of something that does not know or care that you missed it. I watched it until it was gone. Then I called the hiring manager's assistant and left a message explaining that I had experienced a family emergency and missed my flight, and asking whether there was any possibility of rescheduling. I kept my voice professional. I kept it measured. I did not mention my sister's spa appointment or my father's voice, or the sound of my sister's thumb against her phone screen. Then I sat in that airport, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, something that I can only describe as the particular grief of realizing that you have been building your safety net with a hole in it. I had believed all those RS that family was the floor. That no matter how high you climbed or how far you fell, the floor would be there. You might not always get along with the floor. The floor might frustrate you or disappoint you in smaller ways. But when the real moment came, the genuine emergency, the stakes are real crisis, the floor would hold. My floor had just told me it had a spa appointment. I went back to my apartment. I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold while I stared at nothing in particular, turning the day over in my mind the way you turn a stone in your hand, feeling its edges. 2 days passed. I rescheduled meetings I had been putting off. I answered emails. I moved through the mechanical obligations of my life with the careful, deliberate attention of someone who is doing things with their hands so their mind doesn't have to be completely alone with itself. On the third day, my phone rang, my mother. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. I don't know exactly why. Something about wanting to hear the beginning, the quality of the opening silence, the pitch of her voice before she had composed herself into whatever version of the conversation she had prepared. Why are the automatic payments declining? Her voice was tight in a specific way. Not angry. Controlled. The kind of controlled that exists on the border of panic, where a person is choosing their words very carefully because they know that if they let the wrong word out, the thing they're trying to hold together might come apart. Which payments? I said. All of them. A pause, a recalibration. The mortgage, your father's truck payment, Vanessa's credit cards, everything is coming back declined. The bank is sending notices. I held the phone and said nothing. Did something happen with your account? She asked. Her voice had dropped a register. Softer now, careful in the way that people get careful when they realize they might need something from you. Here is something I had never told them directly, not in so many words. For the past several years, my consulting income had not just been funding my own life. It had been funding theirs. Not in dramatic amounts at any given time. Never in a way that required a conversation. Just quietly, steadily, the way water fills a vessel, automatic transfers time to cover shortfalls, credit lines opened in my name and linked to their accounts, mortgage refinancing brokered through my connections and subsidized through my earnings. It had started small, years ago, when my father's contracting business hit a rough patch and my mother's hours got cut, and they needed a bridge loan that no bank would give them at a reasonable rate. I had been the bridge. Then the bridge became a permanent structure, and everyone gradually stopped remembering that it was built by a single person and started treating it as a feature of the landscape. I had never asked for acknowledgement. I had never even wanted it exactly. What I had wanted, what I had told myself I was getting, in some unspoken exchange, was belonging. The sense that I was part of something, that the people in that house were as invested in my life as I was in theirs. My sister's thumb on her phone screen, while I was asking for help, had clarified something important about the nature of that exchange. Maybe check with the bank, I said. My mother made a sound that wasn't quite words. Then my father's voice came through, direct and edged with something that was not concern. Stop playing games, he said. Fix it. Not, are you okay? Not, we know we let you down. Not, we've been thinking about what happened and we want to make it right. Fix it. I thought about the slap. I haven't mentioned the slap yet because I was still trying to decide what to do with it. When I had called from the highway, when I had spoken to my mother and my father and my sister, and none of them would come. I had heard something in the background, some quality of the silence between their words, that made me understand that they were all 3 in the same room, all 3 aware of my situation, all 3 making an active choice. Later, when I had arrived at my parents' house to retrieve a car charger I had left there weeks before, my father had been standing in the doorway in a way that suggested he had been waiting. He had said something about entitlement, about the way I spoke to people, about my tone. I had said, quietly, that I had missed the most important professional opportunity of my life, because no one in this house would lend me a car for 3 hours. And he had slapped me. Not hard enough to put me on the floor. Hard enough to make the room go silent. Hard enough to make my mother look somewhere else, and my sister's eyes go flat, and my own body understand, with a clarity that bypassed language entirely, that this was not a new thing but a revealed thing. A side of the arrangement that had always existed and was only now stepping out of tea. He shadows because I had, for the first time, said something that inconvenienced him. I had picked up my bag. I had tasted the copper at the corner of my lip. I had walked out of that house without a word because I understood, in a way that was deeper than thoughts, that there was nothing left to say in that particular room. Now, on the phone, I listened to my father tell me to fix it. I missed the biggest opportunity of my career, I said, because of what happened. That's not our problem, he said. The words arrived with no pause, no hesitation, no friction, like he had been waiting with them. You made choices. So did you, I said. I ended the call. An hour later, my phone rang again. Not my parents this time. A number I didn't recognize, with an area code that matched my bank's fraud department. I answered. The woman on the other end identified herself as a senior analyst. Her voice had the particular precise efficiency of someone who has handled 100 crises before yours and will handle 100 after. She told me they had flagged multiple unauthorized access attempts on my accounts over the previous 72 hours. She told me the access points had been traced to several devices she would like me to identify. She read me the locations. My parents' home address. My sister's apartment building. The IP address of an older desktop computer I had set up in my parents' den years ago, during a period when I was helping my mother manage some of her correspondence, and had, without thinking too carefully about it, saved my banking credentials in the browser. They were not guessing passwords. They were using credentials I had given them access to, some explicitly, some through the carelessness of trust. Were any of these access attempts authorized? The analyst asked. I thought about every automatic transfer I had set up without discussion, every bill I had covered without acknowledgement, every financial decision I had made on their behalf, because it was easier than having the conversation about what was actually happening. I thought about the architecture of the whole arrangement, the quiet, invisible infrastructure of my money flowing into their lives, and I thought about what it means when someone takes something you gave them freely and decides that entitlement is the same thing as permission. No, I said, none of them were authorized. She walked me through the process. New credentials, removed access, all linked accounts and automatic transfers flagged for review. She mentioned, carefully, that the access attempts could be documented for investigation if I chose to pursue that path. I told her to document everything. I spent the rest of that afternoon on my laptop, working with the kind of focused calm that sometimes descends after a long period of turbulence, the stillness on the other side of the storm. I changed passwords. I removed linked accounts. I redirected automatic payments. I combed through 12 months of transaction records and built a clean, comprehensive picture of every dollar that had flowed out of my accounts and into theirs. By the time I finished, I had a folder on my desktop labeled with their names. It contained 11 months of transaction records, correspondence, and account logs. It was not a weapon. It was a record. There is a difference, and the difference matters, and I understood it clearly. That night, my father called. I answered. You've made your point, he said. His voice was different now, quieter, stripped of the authority he usually wore like a second skin. Reverse whatever you did. The bank is calling. No, I said. A pause. I'm telling you to fix this. I heard you. You're acting irrational. I'm acting accurately. My mother came on the line, her voice sliding between registers, worry, then manipulation, then something that was trying to sound like love. We can work this out, sweetheart. Just restore the accounts first. Just fix it and then we can sit down and... And what? I said. Silence. And talk about it, I said. Is that what was going to happen? Because I've been waiting for the version of this family where we sit down and talk about things. I've been waiting a long time. You're overreacting, my sister said. I hadn't known she was on the line. Her voice carried that particular smooth certainty of someone who has never had to fight for anything and therefore cannot imagine why anyone would need to. You're making this into something huge. Nobody meant for things to. Nobody meant, I said, for me to find out. Silence again, a different quality of silence. You used my accounts without permission, I said. That's not a misunderstanding. That's not a communication issue. That's something else entirely. You owe us, my father said. The words came out slowly, like he was placing them carefully. Everything you've become, everything you've built, you built it with the foundation this family gave you. I thought about that or a moment. I genuinely thought about it, because I believe in being fair even when fairness is inconvenient. The foundation this family had given me was real. They had fed me and housed me and kept me alive through the years when I needed that. My father had taught me, through his contracting work, that you don't complain about a difficult job, you just figure out how to do it. My mother had shown me what it looked like to manage a household on margins that left no room for error. My sister had shown me, without meaning to, that the world does not automatically give you what you deserve, that you have to decide what you're worth, and then build your life around that decision. These were real things. I did not want to be the kind of person who erases real things because they are inconvenient. But the foundation this family had given me was not the same thing as the foundation I had given them. And I was tired of pretending the two were equivalent. I'm flying to Seattle tomorrow, I said. I have an interview. You're not going anywhere, my father said. Not until this is fixed. You don't get to decide that anymore, I said. I hung up. Then I called my attorney. She answered on the second ring. I told her everything. She asked questions in the precise, unshockable way of a lawyer who has seen enough to understand that human beings are capable of extraordinary complexity in the way they harm the people closest to them. She asked me to send her the folder. I sent it that night. By morning, she had reviewed the relevant transactions and confirmed what I already suspected. Several of the transfers, particularly the ones conducted through the saved credentials on the desktop computer, constituted unauthorized account access. The legal terminology was specific, and I will not reproduce it here, but the practical meaning was simple. What my family had been doing with my accounts was not a gray area. She advised me on next steps. I authorized her to file. Then I packed my carry-on, called a cab, and went to the airport. This time I was 3 hours early. The flight to Seattle was unremarkable. I sat in the window seat and watched the landscape change below me, the flat expanse of the Midwest giving way to mountains, then coast, then the specific gray-green of the Pacific Northwest. I drank a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed somewhere better than an airplane. I read through my notes for the interview. I felt, for the first time in days, like myself. Not the self that had been standing on a highway shoulder watching minutes evaporate. Not the self that had been sitting at a kitchen table with a cold cup of tea. The self that existed on the other side of something difficult, steadier, clearer, more certain of what she was worth. The interview was held in a building with glass walls and a view of the water. My interviewer, the regional managing director, a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and the posture of someone who had spent decades being the most competent person in any given room, shook my hand and gestured to a chair and said, without preamble, I heard you had some trouble getting here last time. I did, I said. And yet you made it. I made it. She smiled briefly. Tell me about how you handle situations where the variables fall outside your control. I paused. I thought about the shoulder of Highway 9. I thought about a phone going dark. I thought about the sound of my sister's thumb on her phone screen. Then I started talking. I talked about crisis management, the way someone talks about it when they have just lived through something real. Not with the polished distance of rehearsed answers, but with the particular texture of recent experience. I talked about the difference between the variables you can control and the variables you cannot, and the discipline required to know which is which. I talked about the way that systems fail, not dramatically, not all at once, but through the accumulation of small dependencies that no one thinks to question until the moment when questioning is the only option left. I talked about what it means to make decisions, clearly when the emotional weather is terrible. The interview lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, I knew, with the particular bone-deep certainty that sometimes arrives before the official word does, that the position was mine. My phone was full of missed calls when I walked out. 12 from my mother, one from a number I didn't recognize. I listened to my mother's voicemail first. Her voice was unrecognizable. Stripped of the careful control she usually maintained, it was just a voice, frightened, small, reaching across the distance she had created. "We got served," she said. "Legal notices. They're saying fraud, they're saying misappropriation, a breath. What did you do? Call me. Call me back. Your father is just call me." I called my attorney instead. "They received the filings," she confirmed, "and your father attempted another account access this morning, which we've documented. That strengthens the case considerably." "What happens now?" I asked. "They have choices," she said. "They can settle privately, in which case this stays between you, or they can contest, in which case it becomes a matter of public record. Based on the documentation, I think they'll settle, but that's their decision to make." "Let them make it," I said. I sat on a bench outside the building with the glass walls and the view of the water. The sky was doing something complicated above the harbor, layers of cloud and light competing with each other, neither winning. I watched a ferry move slowly across the bay. I thought about 12 years of work, about automatic transfers and saved passwords and a slap and a spa appointment and a boarding gate that was closed when I arrived. Then my phone rang, the unknown number. I answered. "Ms. Hale," a woman's voice, warm, professional. "This is Catherine Marsh. We met briefly during your first scheduled interview. I'm the one who had to reschedule." "I remember," I said. "I wanted to call you directly," she said. "I sat in on today's interview. I hope you don't mind." She paused. "I've been in this industry for 23 years and I've conducted a lot of interviews. I want you to know that what you brought into that room today was exceptional. Not just your answers, the quality of how you think. The way you've clearly been tested recently and come through it." I didn't know what to say. I said, "Thank you." "We'd like to offer you the position," she said. "Formally, I know you'll receive the written offer through standard channels, but I wanted you to hear it from me first, personally." I looked at the harbor. The ferry was gone. The sky had resolved into something simpler, just gray, clean, and even. "I'd like to accept," I said. That evening, I sat in my hotel room in Seattle with my laptop open and the document folder on my screen. I read through it slowly, carefully, the way you read something when you want to understand it rather than simply to be done with it. 12 years of financial history. 12 years of transactions that told a story I had been writing without fully understanding I was its author. The amounts, taken individually, were not outrageous. That was part of what had made the arrangement so easy to maintain and so difficult to see clearly. It was never one large transfer, never a dramatic gesture of generosity that would have required acknowledgement. It was always small things, timed carefully, structured to look like the ordinary mechanics of a family managing shared expenses. Except we hadn't been managing shared expenses. I had been managing their expenses. And they had, over time, begun to mistake the infrastructure for something that existed naturally, like weather, like gravity, like a river that flows, because that is simply what rivers do. I thought about my father's voice, "You owe us." I thought about everything I owe. I have thought about this seriously and at length, and I want to be precise about it, because precision is what this particular accounting requires. I owe my parents the acknowledgement that they gave me the beginning. The early years, the roof and the food and the assumption that I would survive long enough to become someone. These are real things, and I do not minimize them. I do not owe them 12 years of financial support they never asked about and never acknowledged. I do not owe them the assumption that my silence about the arrangement was the same as my consent to it continuing indefinitely. I do not owe them access to my accounts, my credentials, my money, or my career trajectory. And I do not owe them the particular version of myself that existed to keep them comfortable at the expense of my own forward motion. My phone buzzed, my father. I let it ring. Then I answered. "You've made your point." His voice was stripped down, quieter than I had ever heard it. Not humbled, humility would have required something from him that he had never developed, but diminished. The authority that usually lived in his voice had gone somewhere else. "Call your lawyer, end this." "I want to tell you something," I said. A silence. "I want to tell you this clearly," not because I think it will change anything between us, but because I have spent my whole life saying things imprecisely, because I was afraid of what precision would cost me. And I'm done being afraid of that. He said nothing. You treated me like a resource, I said. For a long time. Not always, not in every moment, but in the ways that counted, in the ways that involved asking me for things, or deciding what I owed you, or standing in a doorway and making a choice about what your hand would do. You treated me like something that existed to serve the needs of this family, and when I needed something in return, not money, not favors, just a car for 3 hours, just the floor wasn't. There. My mother's breathing on the line, shallow, careful. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. I'm doing it because it's accurate. Because there is a document that exists now that tells the accurate story of what the last 12 years have looked like financially, and the law has a word for some of what that document describes, and I am allowing the law to use that word because I am done using softer words in its place. What do you want? My father said, not angry, not calculating, just the question, flat and direct. I thought about what I wanted. I thought about it honestly. I did not want retribution. I did not want them to suffer. I did not want to spend the next 5 years in legal proceedings or estrangement or the particular ongoing grief of a family feud that outlasts everyone's memory of its original cause. What I wanted was simpler and harder than any of those things. I wanted to be free of the story that I had been cast in, the story where I was the reliable one, the invisible support structure, the person who could always be counted on to absorb the costs that no one else wanted to carry. I wanted to step out of that story and into the one that had been waiting for me. The one that had a position at a firm in Seattle. The one that had a higher manager who called to say I was exceptional. The one that existed on the other side of 12 years of work that had always deserved better than a bolt on a door that opened for everyone except me. Nothing, I said. A long silence. I want nothing from you, I said. I have what I need. My attorney will handle the rest. If you settle, this stays private. If you don't, it doesn't. That choice is yours. And us, my mother said. Her voice was very small. What about us? I thought about every version of that question. The version that was genuinely asking about the future of a relationship. The version that was asking whether the financial infrastructure could be rebuilt. The version that was simply scared. I don't know yet, I said. I need time to figure out who you are to me when I'm not funding you. And I think you need time to figure out who I am when I'm not here to be used. I paused. I got the job, I said. I thought you should know. No one said anything. It's a good position, I said. Senior executive track, it's what I've been working toward. Adelaide, my mother started. Goodbye, Mom, I said. I ended the call. I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of it, feeling the particular texture of having said true things to people who were not yet ready to hear them. Then I closed my laptop. I ordered room service. I took a long shower. I sat by the window of my hotel room and watched the lights of Seattle doing what city lights do at night, that particular quiet electricity, all those small bright points of human occupation scattered across the dark. I felt, for the first time in a long time, like a person who occupied her own life completely. Not a supporting character in someone else's story, not an infrastructure, not a resource. A person, with a job and a future, and a city full of lights that didn't know yet what she was capable of. The weeks after that had their own texture. I signed the offer letter in a coffee shop near my new apartment, a place I had found on a Saturday morning with a moving van waiting outside and the particular nervous energy of starting something real. I unpacked boxes the way you unpack when you know you're staying, slowly, thoughtfully, placing things where they actually belong rather than where they're convenient. My attorney called to tell me my family had opted to settle privately. The terms were clear. The financial records would remain sealed, the access attempts would not be referred for criminal investigation, and a structured repayment arrangement would account for the transfers they had made without authorization. It was not punitive. It was accurate. My mother texted once, about a month later. Not to argue, not to relitigate, not to perform an apology that was really a request. Just 3 sentences. I've been thinking about what you said. I don't know how to fix what happened, but I'm trying to understand it. I read it several times. I thought about what to say. I thought about the difference between forgiveness and trust, about how one can exist without the other, about how the right order of operations matters more than most people admit. I wrote back, "That's a start." I didn't know what it would grow into. I still don't. Some things take longer than you can plan for. Some relationships have to be rebuilt from materials that haven't been discovered yet. Some versions of healing look nothing like the original thing and turn out to be better precisely because of that. What I know is this. The afternoon I walked out of that interview building in Seattle, with a job offer in my pocket and 12 missed calls on my phone and a harbor full of gray water in front of me, I was carrying something I had never quite managed to hold before. Not success exactly. Success had come and gone before in smaller forms. What I was carrying was the clean, simple weight of having finally, at long last, told the truth about my own value, and having refused to accept anything less. The gate had closed, my family had made a choice, and I had made one too. I walked into the rest of my life the way you walk into something you've earned. With both feet, eyes open, nothing left behind that deserved to come with me. The lights of Seattle were on when I arrived. They have been on every morning since.